Hello and welcome to episode 210 of the Mark and Me podcast. As always, I'm your host Mark. Joining me on today's episode is the singer and songwriter from the incredible SeeYouSpaceCowboy. Yes, I'm joined by Connie Sgarbossa. We get to talk to Connie in great detail about her musical influences to date, the band's history and touring life, the importance of the LGBTQIA+ community, but this interview does get very deep. We get to discuss Connie's drug addiction, suicide attempts, and how addiction has led to Connie losing many loved ones and the importance of rehab. This for me is one of the most open and honest interviews that I've ever conducted for Mark and Me, and I'm very thankful to Connie for being so open, so honest, and trusting in me in this podcast in doing this interview. I'm very proud of this and I can't wait to share it with you. In true typical Mark and Me fashion, I do like to touch base and talk about my last episode. On episode 209, I was joined by the absolutely amazing Derek Descanio from the awesome band State Champs. This was an amazing interview and I'm so grateful for him for coming on the show. Some amazing downloads, some incredible feedback, and honestly one of my favourite interviews. But today, it's all about me and Connie, and I can't wait for you to hear this. So I think the best thing to do right now is to get straight to it. So here's me and Connie talking all things music. So Connie, thanks for joining me today on the Mark and Me podcast.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Connie, what I like to do today for the listeners out there that might be discovering your band for the first time is take it right back to the very start. So I want to know, when you were growing up, what was that first album that you bought that made you fall in love with music?
I would probably have to give that to it's hard because when I was younger, like, and I first started getting the punk, I didn't really give a shit about albums, but it's definitely like Black Flag was probably the first band that made me be like, oh, this is music that like me, an untalented person, can make. Like I can just yell. And I was like 10 at the time, 9 or 10. And so I definitely like probably like give it to like Black Flag or like JFA as like the first like bands that were like the thing that made me realize that like I can like be a part of music even though like I didn't dedicate my life to like playing it. And then of course it kind of evolved to like where I am now. But like that was definitely like the start. It was like being like a little 10-year-old kid in like 6th grade skating and listening to Black Flag and then really wanting to start a band after that.
And what about live bands? Because obviously when you buy a CD or a record when you're growing up, you listen to it to death. It's not like you could stream back then, but to go and see a band live is when you really kind of get an experience of, you know, how a band can provide so much adrenaline and a rush when you go and see them on stage. What was that first show you remember going to that made those hairs stick up on your neck and you're like, oh my God, like this is what I want to do?
So I have like 2 instances because it was a weird, high school was kind of a weird, like, it's like a realization era for me, but the first one was seeing Ceremony in 2009 at the Che Cafe. I remember because before that I had seen like legacy bands like Dead Kennedys, JFA. I'd seen them play Old Men on stage at like House of Blues, like big venues. Didn't really like give me like the drive, but seeing Ceremony at the Che Cafe, which is a venue we've had down here, it's like a vegan, anarchist, like non-hierarchical, no one owns it, it's run by a collective. Seeing Ceremony play in this room to like 200 kids packed into like a room that probably could only hold 150 at most, and like discovering like the DIY scene was like a major moment for me to be like, this is something I want to be a part of. I think I was like 13 at the time maybe, but then a year later is when I got my introduction to like Screamo, or like the old OG Screamo. It was a time when I was like randomly just hopping on the bus after I got out of school to go see whatever show at the Che Cafe. I wouldn't know who was playing. I just wanted to go, just to go. And I saw this band called 10,000 Leagues play, and it was like my first introduction to like people, you know, like the singer was like throwing like the mic over the rafters and like wrapping it around his neck and just like screaming and rolling on the floor, like going crazy. And that was like my first exposure to like, oh, like punk isn't just mad. Like you can also be like sad and you can just like literally like lose your mind entirely. So that was a big moment for me when I started to like shift away from like 80s hardcore to like the more emotional side of music. Because at that point I started to get more sad and less mad. I was started to deal with like depression and stuff. So it was definitely a pivotal point for like where I started to shift, not into like what Space Cowboy is, but like more into that, like the more hidden emotional side of hardcore.
And was there a point at that moment that you thought you'd only ever do that as a career? Like you're only going to be in a band, you only want to sing. There's never an option to go and work in a shop or do a normal office job. You're always going to be just focused on purely writing.
Well, I actually never have had a moment like that. The weird thing about me and music is I never even wanted to do this as a career. I would always focus more on like art and graphic design, and like that
Yeah.
was kind of the thing. So like even like when like Space Cowboy started like getting label offers and stuff like that, like it was never something that I or the band was like really pushing for. So it's really interesting when people always ask me like, what's the secret to success? Like, how do you get big? Like, how do you do it? And I don't know, because like we never wanted that. We never tried for it. We literally would just book 42-day tours ourselves because we just wanted to go play the country. I wanted an adventure. So to this day, it's still kind of just this thing that's fallen in my lap. And I just told myself I was like about to go to college, and and then the offers came in. I said I'd be stupid to not see where this takes me.
Did you have the full backing of your family, or were they like, look, you need to get a real job, like you need to study, this is too risky, it's a make or break time? Or were they like, look, we believe in you, you can do this?
Oh, they definitely did not believe in me, but like I was also the kind of person that left, you know, after I graduated high school, and kind of just didn't really have a relationship with my family that much. I like moved to the Bay and was just doing my own thing. But when I first like started telling them like, hey, I'm not gonna go to college, we're getting signed. At first they were like, they of course they were like, are you sure? Like blah blah blah. But then when they started coming to shows and like seeing the amount of kids there and seeing what we were doing, they kind of started to like, especially when we started like getting like managers and like the business side came in,
Yeah.
stuff like that. They're like, oh, okay, so like this is like somewhat feasible. It's not just a pipe dream entirely. When we like went to the UK for the first time, things like the little like stepping stones and milestones that like my parents have kind of been a bit more okay with the idea, and they don't like hassle me about like going back to college or becoming like a graphic designer for Nike or whatever. It's funny because my little brother's in the band too, so it applies for like both of us. He's the kind of same as me, dropped out of college. We just do this now. Didn't really know what we are gonna do with our lives, and then now like this is the opportunity we're like kind of presented with. This silly band that we started a few years ago is now like our lives.
And how was it for you during lockdown? Because obviously taking 2 years out of not being really able to do what you do best, of going out there performing, being with the band all the time. Was it a time for you to reflect and see if it's still what you wanted, or did you just kind of become more passionate and driven and want it more than ever?
So like the pandemic for us, it was really hard to not be able to play shows, because that's part of my favorite part of like being in a band is like touring and playing shows. It wasn't really a time that we reflected as in like, are we gonna do this? But it was a major like upshift for us, because like a lot of members left. Like at the beginning, we did a lot of like members changes. We brought back a lot of OG members who wanted to like rejoin. And we kind of changed up that dynamic, and we changed up like the style a bit, and we kind of like took the pandemic as like a pause, breathe. With this new lineup, like I was the only person in the band who had played on the last album, so it's kind of just like, what do we want to do now? Because Space Cowboy has always been this band of like, we go through like little eras, and it's not because we're changing sounds to be more marketable or whatever. It's literally just every time we sit down and write an album, it's like, well, what do you want to do now? Like what's going to make you feel fulfilled? Like, so we really used the entire pandemic to write. We did the split with If I First. That was a lot of fun. It was a little fun project to kind of test the waters with like what we wanted to do. And then we spent basically all the pandemic writing and recording Romance. So it was sad to not be able to play shows, but we use our time wisely. And I also just poured myself more into like my other job as like a freelance artist for bands, and I like really upped like what I do in that demeanor or in that like area of my life, because I had the time finally to like pour into that.
Yeah. And now that obviously the world is almost getting back to, you know, normality where you can go and tour and there's the UK dates announced and festivals again and all this, does it feel like this huge relief that's like it's real, it's actually happening again?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, when we did our first tour back, it was a really fun little tour with If and I First, and it was like small, it was like 3 weeks, I think. But it really set in when we did our headliner for Romance, because it was really the first time playing the entire country after the pandemic, and the first time really us seeing like how much we had grown, because I had no idea. I kind of thought we'd be coming back to playing to less people than we did when the pandemic hit, but it was like exponentially like almost like twice as many kids in like each city kind of deal. So it was like really, really cool. It was like all the anxiety I had was just like gone. It was like we're back, and like it's better than ever.
It's amazing. With the UK dates so close, it's going to be amazing. Like, it feels that everybody's now just announcing tours all the time because they're just kind of catching up for lost time, which is awesome. It's insane. My diary's mental. I'm sure yours is the same.
Yeah, I mean it's wild, and especially wild to like go back across the pond again, because I didn't think that that would happen for a while. So it's like something that's really exciting for me because I love going over and doing UK and EU tours. The UK saved this band's life. We almost broke up while we were in Germany, and they came to the UK, and then the shows were so amazing that we're like, yeah, it's worth it, y'all. Like keep going. So I'm beyond excited to like head back over and just to, like have like that. It adds on to that feeling of like things are back in like full force. Like we are go again. Like we're going to other countries. Like it's no like it's time to like put everything back into it.
Do you feel in a better place now? Do you feel happier? Do you feel like the lineup is solid? That, you know, you said you had a lot of changes and all this, but do you feel that yourself in your kind of headspace is in a good place, that you're ready to go and tour and be around the right people and not get into a position where the band nearly break up again?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, this lineup of the band has been probably the most stable we've had, and it's been the best working like internally and stuff. So it definitely feels like great because like yeah, there's no conflict, there's no fights. It's just a well-oiled machine at this point of just like everybody writes together now. It used to kind of just be one person would write stuff and we'd all be like, okay, cool. Now it's like we're like sharing ideas. We're like really like figuring out what we want to do for our next release. Like it's really, really nice and a breath of fresh air to have like a lineup that I feel is as close to permanent as we can get, instead of like the myriad of lineup changes that we've had in the past.
And do you feel better yourself? Obviously, I don't want to dive too much into it, but there is, you don't hold back on this. You put it on your own bio and all the links and stuff. You nearly died of a drug overdose. It must be a very scary time. Do you feel like you're in a much better place now?
I feel like I'm definitely better than I was a year ago. I mean, of course, any addict would tell you that there's still the struggle is always real. Like even no matter if you're clean for 3 weeks or clean for 3 years, the struggle is always there. I definitely feel better than I have in a long time with like touring back, with like being able just to have something like fill my time, because I'm
Yeah.
somebody who struggles with being alone and struggles with like idle hands, I guess you could say. So being able to like, the next 6 months we're on tour for approximately 4 of them, so it's like really something that keeps me clean, keeps me away from like my vices, well, most of them at least. And it's nice to just be busy. I don't do well just sitting on my hands at home.
Have you had to make any major changes? Because, we're talking about music and touring, but depression and addiction is huge. And I never shy away from it. And I've had guests on here that are open to talk about it because people do listen and suffer. And some people aren't confident enough to tell others. I think that's the biggest problem. But have you made changes with the people around you, or what have you done differently to kind of avoid slipping back into that place?
I mean, I haven't really had to do much because luckily most of the people I surround myself with don't. I was like kind of like the black sheep, so to speak, of like I'm really the only one in Space Cowboy or like my immediate friend group down here who struggles with this addiction problem. There are a lot of people around me who are ex-addicts who are really nice to talk to and be like, because they can relate. They can be like, hey, I'm really struggling today, or I'm really craving, or like I'll like do my normal thing of like, well, fuck it, I'm just gonna like hit up the dealer, and they'll be like, no, 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 like no, you're not, like just chill out, you'll be fine, la di da da. So I haven't really had to change a lot. Because I have a good support system. It's more just like holding myself accountable. And even when I do slip up, when I do relapse and stuff like that, um, understanding that like it's not an excuse to say fuck it and just go dive in head first. It's more you need to just be like, okay, like I fucked up, it happened, but I need to like get right back on it and be like, not. Especially it's especially hard being bipolar because I'll have manic episodes and I'll do things without even realizing it, and I'll wake up 2 days later being like, what did I just do? And it's in those moments where like I really have to like make sure I like stabilize myself and be like, it's okay, I'm sure I did a lot of terrible stuff, like I'm sure I sent some really messed up videos of me doing things that probably made people really angry, like in group chats and stuff, and I'm sure people are upset with me for like relapsing and doing whatever, but I just need to like hold myself accountable and like go back to like trying my best to not indulge in that side of me that's like extremely self-destructive.
The thing is with addiction as well, isn't it? You can't just switch a button and change overnight. And I think a lot of people expect, oh, they've gone to rehab, or oh, they're not doing drugs anymore. You're never going to just completely change, are you, overnight?
No, I mean, and that's kind of why I've been trying to be so honest with things, and especially with romance, why I was so honest with like my addiction, my mental health issues, because like, yeah, it's not as simple. And unfortunately, we pretty much only hear about like the death of someone or their success
Yeah.
after, and we never hear about the process, because it is, any addict will tell you that like you will relapse. You're not just gonna wake up one day and be like, I'm not gonna do drugs and like live the rest of your life sober. It's just not gonna happen. Um, it is an ongoing process. Like, I am around one month clean from opiates, but that's not to say that I'm going to come back from this 2-month tour and slip up, but it doesn't mean that I'm going back to being a full-on addict, and I'm not going to be nodding off on my couch again for weeks straight. It is a process, and it's really hard. And it's hard for people who've not experienced it to understand that even like the process of quitting is scary, because like withdrawal is gnarly. Like I've done benzo and opiate withdrawals at the same time, to the point where people were telling me you need to go to the hospital or like you might have a seizure and die. So like even when you get to the point of like building up the capacity to quit, you have to deal with a lot of hurdles, whether it's like the physical pain of withdrawal, and then followed by the worst like mental like agony that you can probably experience. So like it is hard. It's not as simple as we want to make it seem, where it's just like put you in the facility, you come out, you're good. It's not like that. It is a process that lasts years and years and years.
I really respect your honesty there, because a lot of people try and sugarcoat it and say, "Oh yeah, I'm fine now. I'm clean. I'm never going to go back there." But you know that there are going to be times that you relapse again. You know that there's going to be times that you will be tempted and probably delve into it again. But it's about getting the balance, isn't it? So it's not over, like, so it doesn't overcome you and put you in a
Yeah.
place where you could, die, which we don't want.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. It's a lot. That cliche thing of once an addict, always an addict is true to an extent. It's not to say that like you'll always do whatever you can to get drugs. You'll always be doing them. It's just that you will always carry that mentality around with you. I mean, you'll always have those random cravings. Even if you're 5 years down the line. I mean, I've talked to people who are sober for 10 years. I'm like, yeah, sometimes I still get quote unquote triggered, and sometimes I will still wake up in a cold sweat and really want to like find that fool's number, but you just have to not. and you have to like stay strong and like understand that you'll never have a normal relationship. You might have been able to do minor drugs and stuff when you're younger and it's fun. It's like experimental, but you'll never be like that ever again. Any slip up is a potential to just dive headfirst into it. Even if it's just, I'm going to do Molly because I'm going to a rave. It's like, well, that might mean that you wake up and go and get cocaine, benzos, and you would dive back into opiates like, a few days later, you know. You just need to understand that, like, this is your life now. Like, you made your bed, you have to lay in it. But it's not like a woe is me depression. Life's terrible. It's just, hey, like, pick yourself up and keep going.
Was it initially something to try and distract you from everything else that's in your head, to just to try and numb pain, to try and stop your thoughts getting too dark, or was it just a kind of an energy boost to go out and feel better?
So it started off for me really, like, I experimented in high school. And, you know, I drank, I did drugs, like, just for fun. And then I didn't touch really anything, not even alcohol, for years. And then I found out that Molly was a good way to cure my social anxiety. I was living in Oakland. There's a lot of parties, a lot of like people fix up abandoned buildings and throw raves in them. It's like part of like the culture up there. And I would never go because I was so anxious. So one day I just decided to take some Molly, and it just made my social anxiety go away. And I had the time of my life. So it was like a double-edged sword at first, but then it really got bad after my ex Natalie killed herself, because that's when I was definitely masking. I didn't want to properly grieve. I didn't want to feel anything. So I started getting blackout drunk every day. And then it moved into other substances. I started, you know, doing a lot of benzos. Then, you know, to offset this like sluggish depression, I started doing a lot of cocaine. And then eventually down the line, I just got out of hand. I went from taking a lot of uppers to doing only downers, just to like not feel a thing. And it snowballed, like in the way that, like, we, you know, there's like those silly things that like weed's a gateway drug, blah blah blah. It's not so much that, it's that your emotions are almost a gateway. You will, if you let it, you will tumble until, you know, I wake up and I'm, you know, smoking Oxycontin and making crack at the same time. And it's like, wow, how did I get here? What am I doing? And then you just have to begin the arduous journey of recovery.
And with losing someone that's so close to you, do you feel you've still got that buried and you're trying to avoid it? And that's a very deep question, but is it something you still don't feel you can face? Is it got to be more time to kind of become reality in your head, or are you just trying to put it back and just not even think about it?
I feel at this point, because it's been 3.5 years, it is something I'm more willing to face, but definitely took me a long time to like be willing to get that, to be willing to get to that point. Like, currently it is something that I can look at and be like, yes, it was a very sad thing. I've definitely come to terms with it more than I have in the past, when I was just using sex and drugs and people. Essentially, I was a big part of the romance of affliction. And like, why I called it that is because I, you know, in order to escape my pain, I've done a lot of things that like I'm not like proud of. You know, I've used people, I've used substances, to do anything for years to avoid it. But now I feel like in the last 6 months, it's something I've finally am really coming to terms with, without having, and then able to face and think about, without having just a complete mental breakdown and just like going to like this like insane psychosis that I used to like always delve into, where I would go around for like a week straight, and I would be so fucked up that I would insist that Natalie was still alive. And, you know, people around would be like, she's not. Like, part of the reason you're like this is because she's not. But I was so detached from reality, I would believe it. But yeah, in the last 6 months, I've definitely been able to like face it and like properly grieve and like come to terms with it, instead of just trying to constantly run away.
Yeah. It's hard, isn't it? Because no one wants to face the reality of it, and you can't change the outcome, but you kind of eventually know that this time will run out and you do have to kind of accept the worst.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely takes you to a really dark place, and it's, and for me, it's my first major run-in with death. And so like, I would always been really, you know, almost cocky and confident about like, I accept death as part of life, you know, being younger. I'm like, it is what it is, blah, blah, blah. But really being confronted with it for the first time really was way more than I thought it would be, especially somebody who, you know, weeks prior I was hanging out with and someone I loved. And so, yeah, it really is something that's very difficult to face when when it actually comes down to it. And of course, the sad reality is that like I'm lucky to have just lost one person. I have friends who have lost 20, 30 to drugs and such, drugs or suicide or so it is a really difficult thing to come to terms with, the permanence of death, like knowing that like you can't go back in time, you can't just like go visit this person, like make things better for them, you can't help them. And like that was like something that like was really pertinent when I wrote Late December, was this idea of like I'm sorry I couldn't help you like I thought I'd be able to, you know. And it's really hard, especially when you're dealing with someone who you know is in danger of ending their own life. And I knew for a whole year, because Natalie told me from the get-go, hey, if you're gonna fall in love with me, you should know that I might not be around for that long. Like I've been, you know, and it was me being like, oh no, I can like help, I can like make it better, like I can like I'll like help, I'll keep you alive. And it doesn't, you know, it's a fool's errand because it's not going to work out. You know, if somebody wants to depart from this world on their own terms, they will. So there's definitely this other side of feeling like I failed. When like in reality, like I know now that like it's not my fault.
Yeah.
But I definitely felt for a long time that like, it was my fault and like I like failed her.
And that's the worst, isn't it? Because you're going to feel that guilt on a whole other level, and you can never have that conversation to confirm that it wasn't you that caused it or anything.
Yeah.
So you're kind of left with your own thoughts, which sometimes can be the worst.
Yeah, I mean, and it was nice. Like her family, you know, I had a good relationship with them, and they always told me like, hey, like, you know, even if you know Natalie died in the end, we're thankful because you helped keep her alive for longer, so like we could all spend more time with her. Like they really like. I didn't really want to accept it at first when they told me that years ago, because I was all just in this headspace of I failed. But like looking back now, I can like appreciate those kinds of statements, because it's like, you know, like, yeah, in the end, what happened, but like to know that like people appreciate that, like I did help her and helped keep her going and like made her happy and like her somewhat in her last like year of life, is like, it means a lot to me now. It's not something I could appreciate back then, but like now I can look back at it and be like, life goes on, life is what it is, and like people make their own choices, and like we all choose how we go about life and what we do for other people and such.
Yeah, it was too raw, wasn't it? The timing was way too much for you to even try and digest the fact that you'd lost her, never mind come to terms with how it happened.
Yeah, but
so when we're talking, my kind of head processes thoughts, and there might be people that think this about you and think, I hope Connie's going to be around. I hope Connie doesn't go too far. I hope they're in my life for a long time. And the way we're talking about your ex, there might be people having the same conversation about you. And I really hope that, you know, there's a different outcome for you.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so too. And that was something I had to come to terms with when I overdosed, because there's like, you know, my girlfriend was the one who found me on the couch and, you know, called the paramedics and had me Narcan twice. But I definitely had to come to terms with the fact that like I'm doing almost the same thing, and I'd be putting Chloe through the same thing that I went through in a way. And I didn't really think about that, because I was incredibly selfish a year ago. It was more just like, fuck off. I'm going to do whatever I want to my body. If I choose to leave this world, like I will leave. Without realizing that, like, you know, to wake up and like kind of like almost a movie, have my vision fisheye and have Chloe, my little brother, and Tay, our bassist, just standing over me not even knowing what happens, and like having to be told that like, hey, you just almost died. And me being so arrogant that it's just like, I don't even care. Like, I'm just like, it's like, you know, like, and there's even like a debate over whether I did it on purpose or not. And like, I don't even know if I did it on purpose or not, because I don't remember anything about that night. I took 10 bars of Xanax and I snorted 30 milligrams of Oxy. And then, you know, who knows what my intentions were. But it's definitely a sobering moment from when I realized, oh shit, I'm putting my people I care about through that too. And like I realizing that it's just not fair. I shouldn't do that. And like while like I still believe personally, like whatever I do to myself is my choice, it realizing it affects everyone around me too, just as I was affected by Natalie's death.
And with all this and the grief and everything that happened and the close to yourself dying through an overdose, with all that going into the writing of your music, and you've said before it's quite cathartic to you, and you know it's all these experience that goes into the lyric writing and the songs. You're now in a better place. You know, it's 12 months gone, the album's done, it's out there. What happens now about future writing? Because I don't want you to have to go through all that again to try and put pen to paper, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I've never been like the kind of person who will like purposely pick the darkest parts of my life to write about. I just like for romance, I literally took a journal I had kept for 2 years of like all my thoughts, all whether they drug induced or sober, contemplative after. But when it comes to like a new writing something new, I kind of like the last couple albums have been just building upon the other one because it's kind of been a sequential thing. The correlation between entrance and exit wounds was about Natalie's death and like my descent into it. Romance was about the years of dealing with it and dealing with the disappointment that like I had planned for romance to be the I'm better now, like don't give up, it's okay album, and I couldn't write that because it wasn't true, you know. And now when it comes to a new album, I'm kind of faced with this dilemma of like I'm getting better, but I'm still in a really dark place, and like
Yeah.
how do I convey that duality well? Because romance is kind of just all like this is my ugly diary of the ugly things I've done, but now I'm in this place where I'm trying to get better, but it's still a dark timeline. So I'm thinking I'm currently in the process of figuring out how to like express that in a way in music because it's something that I've never done before. It's always just kind of been like dark, 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 or like extremely political, like early Space Cowboy was. So it's definitely something I'm like still rattling around my brain how to like put that out there lyrically and like really even like what I want to express because there's a part of me that's like I don't really, even though I am trying, I don't really want to write a positive record. It's just not how I feel right now. I'm still, even though I'm trying, it's still a painful process. So there's part of me that wants to just be like the most cathartic thing would be to fixate on like the dark parts. But then it contradicts what I was trying to say with the romance, which is like, hey, don't idolize me or like what I'm going through. This like, don't romanticize the darkness of like my life or your own life. It's not a good thing. It is part of life. It is what we go through. Life can be a torturous thing, but don't romanticize it. Like understand that it's dark and like feel it, and you can because you do, and you can let it out at shows and let it out with music, but like don't like hold it up as this glorious thing of like we had back in the day where everyone would post their like self-harm photos, like I have a bunch of cigarette burns on my hands and I fucking hate them and I can't even like, they're like ugly and they're on me forever. It's never something I romanticize, and I would never romanticize drug addiction, mental health problems, or anything like that. So it's a really hard thing to like quantify without that, like without people being like, oh, like depression and drugs and being bipolar and like like using people to like hide your own feelings and like all these things is like that's like what's in. It's a hard thing for me to come to terms with. I don't like being, and this is, it goes into something else that I struggle with to this day. I don't like being like a quote unquote idol for people. I've always carried around the mentality of no idols, nobody to look up to, just myself. I'm doing what I'm doing. So I have a hard time coming to terms with the fact that there are a lot of people who look up to me. And I get that, like, especially in queer scene, like we like it is good for other people to have somebody represent them. But for me, it's something that goes against like my being, and like, it's hard because I look at myself as somebody who is such a flawed person, especially in what I do and what I've done. Um, it's hard for me to quantify having all these people look up to me, be like, "You're such an inspiration. You're like the reason I came out," like, yeah, et cetera, et cetera. It's really hard for me to like. It's like two parts of my brain are like battling, and I don't know how to like get them to work together to like get that message out that I want to be out there.
But isn't it so pure and so important that you're being transparent, that you're not trying to pretend it's all okay, and all the people that these other people can idolize, they've got flaws, they're just not willing to put them out there like you do?
Yeah, I mean, transparency is always something I will do. I will never write a fantasy album. I will never come up with things that didn't happen to me. I will always like the band will always be like my expression, like in terms of like lyrics and such. Like my like in terms of like me as like the vocalist, it will always be my experiences, it will always be my feelings. Yeah, I will never make anything up. I will always be transparent because I don't see a point to doing what I'm doing if I'm not letting out what I go through. And like, if people resonate with that, and if people find solace in like me talking about addiction and things because they might be able to relate and it helps them, that's great. And that's something that I'm sorry that you're going through this similar thing to me, but I'm glad that you can relate and like in a cathartic way to it, and that's why the transparency is so important to me. It's why it's so important to like write the songs that I've been writing, because if I don't, I'd probably fucking explode.
With this podcast, I ask every guest, it doesn't matter if they're a big film star, a director, a musician, I ask them basically what advice you give to anyone that's trying to become in that profession. So for you, if someone's listening today that wants to start a band and be a singer like you, but I think this is deeper today. This interview is more about facing your kind of fears and being transparent. Now, if anyone's listening today, let's switch this around a bit. If anyone's listening today and they're scared to be the person they are, they're not wanting to come out, they're not wanting to tell their family the real them, what advice do you give to people that are struggling, that may have listened to your music and felt inspired, but still haven't got that final bit of confidence to just take that step?
I mean, first off, I would like people to know that it is okay. You don't have to feel ashamed if you're scared or not willing to come out yet. It is. I have so many people ask me like, I want to come out to my parents, I want to come out to my friends, but I know they're gonna reject me. I don't think that there's anything wrong with, fully accepting and understanding that fear is valid and your concern is valid. I mean, when I first came out, like, it took my family a long time. They still don't accept it to an extent. And like, not everyone can just say fuck it like I did, like, and when I came out, like, I was living away from home. I was like, in San Francisco. I was like, the most queer friendly place in the world, probably. So it was easier for me. And if it's not easy for you and it's not something, don't feel pressured to. You can still live a totally valid existence as yourself internally or out in the world outside of the people you're scared to come out to. And that's totally okay. And if you do want to take those steps to come out, you need to understand that you can't like beat people into submission, into like accepting who you are. You will never, grab someone and shake them until they start calling you a girl. It's like, it doesn't work for me. I tried for a long time and it doesn't work. And you just need to understand that if you have people in your life who care about you and you care about them, but they're having a hard time accepting it, time is what they need. When I first came out to my parents, for years, they still called me by my dead name and such. But now, it's my birthday. I'm gonna write "Happy Birthday, Connie" on my cake. Like, it just takes time. And understand that, like, you will have to have tough conversations, and you might have to walk people through things that seem easy to you. Like, not everyone, some people have a hard time grasping the concept, especially parents, people who've known you for your whole life. You just need to be willing to have those conversations and walk through it. And if somebody is toxic and completely unwilling in a malicious way to accept who you are, and not coming from a place of just struggling to grasp it, but from a place of malice. You need to be willing to take the steps to like cut that person out of your life if need be. Don't be afraid. Don't be like, oh, they're my family, like I have to. If they're truly damaging to your life, you need to be willing to walk away and live your own life. Because sometimes when we come out, there are things that we lose, and it's part of the process. I mean, it's the unfortunate reality of being queer. It's the unfortunate reality of being trans, is that sometimes like we drift and move apart from people who can't, you know, are unwilling to accept it in a malicious way, or purely because they don't want to.
And do you think that's difficult when our society and the way we are is all about popularity? We want the most likes on our photos. We want the most followers. We want this whole thing where we're all guilty of wanting to be popular. So if you're going to do this announcement that might make you unpopular or have a different view for some people, it's such a risk, isn't it? Because you always still want to remain popular.
Yeah, I mean, it is hard because like losing people is difficult. I mean, losing the support of people who you care about and you thought that they'd care about you no matter what, it is hard. And like, yeah, I won't lie, being trans is difficult. It's not, I get death threats, like, you know, there's all the transphobic comments, blah, blah, blah. Like, I've grown a thick skin, and, you know, I've always kind of been more on the side of less complaining on Twitter, more like beating the shit out of people who call me a faggot on the street. I've always just kind of like the way I was raised in the world I was in was always, I've carried over that, I guess, that more like quote unquote masculine mentality from when I was still like confused, and like I put it into like, I call it not soft queer but abrasive faggotry, where it's like I'm gonna fight you. Like if you disrespect me, I will fight you. And I know not everyone's like that, and so you have to understand that you will deal with scrutiny, and like especially on the internet, there's not much you can do because they're not in front of you. You can't just be like, you want to fight about it, like we can duke it out right now. You just need to realize that like you will get hate. It's gonna happen. It's the internet. It's anonymous. It's really cool for some reasons and really shitty for others. But just like understand that like if living like as your true self is important enough to you, you will survive. You will make it. You will crawl through the shit and come out, you know, living a happier life. Or at least hopefully. I can't guarantee that, but that's like the hope. And like if that's a worthy plunge for you, do it. If you feel like living as yourself, like as it was for me, finally coming out, it's worth it once you crawl through this shit. It's not easy, and it never will be. It's not easy for me, even like, you know, with I guess my quote unquote status in the scene and stuff like that. It's still not easy. You become more of a target, but it's all about it personally. Is it worth it to you? And if it is, then it doesn't matter if you're taking baby steps or huge strides. Like, take the plunge, start the process if you're comfortable, and just know that it's going to be difficult, but this is the life we live, and this is the world we live in. And hopefully, and we hope that the more of us that come out and the more we work towards it, then like the future generations won't have to like deal with what we dealt with. Just as, you know, we benefit from like riots in the past that were fighting for justice, and we benefit from the marches in San Francisco.
Your honesty and transparency today has been a thing of beauty, and it's so raw but so real. And I just want to thank you for being so open today. And I know a lot of listeners to this podcast will take a lot from today, and I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I mean, I feel like if I've always told myself, if I have a platform, then like I need to use it. You know, if I've gotten the opportunity to speak and be seen, then like I have to like use it.
The one final question I have for you today, and I ask this to everyone that comes on the podcast, you'll enjoy this. The final piece of music that plays on the podcast is chosen by the guest. So whoever comes on the podcast that gets to choose it. Now, I don't give you time to go away and think about it. I want to know from you a song, and it's not from your own band. It's got to be something that you love. It can be a piece of music from a film, maybe just a band you absolutely fucking adore, but a song that then, once all this is edited and it's out there for the world to listen to, is the outro piece of music for this episode. So Connie, today, what is your song that you want that comes to the heart and soul when I ask the question?
I pick Interstate 8 by Modest Mouse.
Incredible. Is there a certain reason behind it, or do you not want the listeners to know?
No, I mean, I'd love to know. It's because it's been a song that's gotten me through a lot of shit through high school. It was the first tattoo I ever got on my arm was lyrics from that song. It's Modest Mouse is my favorite band of all time, like especially old Modest Mouse. So whenever anything's going on in my life, it pairs perfectly with Modest Mouse, and especially Interstate 8 because it's a song about, you know, just dealing with life, you know, the dealing with like the feelings of like trudging through life, not going anywhere. And it's just a song that's always resonated with me since I was 13. And I'm 27 now, so it's been 14 years. It's stayed as one of my favorite songs of all time.
Over half of your life.
Yep.
That's amazing. I will hopefully catch you on tour in the UK. It's been a long time coming. I wish you luck with all the tour, with wherever you decide to go with the next album and how you're going to write it, with which members and everything. But thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure. Thank you for wanting to talk to me.
So there it is. There's my interview with me and Connie from the amazing SeeYouSpaceCowboy. As I said at the start of today's interview, I really believe that Connie is my most open and honest guest I've ever had on this podcast. To go into great detail about such personal and raw subjects really means a lot, and to trust in me like that goes a long way, so thank you so much. If you've listened to today's interview and you've enjoyed it, please go and check out the band SeeYouSpaceCowboy. And even better, if you get a chance to see them live, go and do it. You will not be disappointed. So much energy, so much emotion, and just one of the best bands out there right now. And if you can't go and see them, just listen to them, or buy a vinyl or CD. Support this band because they really deserve it. If you've really enjoyed today's episode, it's never going to cost you anything. Mark and Me will always be free. But what I do ask is that you share it on your Facebook, Twitter or Instagram. All the links are on markandme.com, and it costs you absolutely nothing. It's literally the click of a button, but it goes a long way and makes a massive difference for me in this podcast. I'm an independent podcaster and I'm on my own, so any support with marketing goes a long, long way. You might think it's just a retweet or a click of a button to share it on your Facebook, but honestly, it brings a whole new audience to Mark and Me, and that's something that money can't buy. So if you've enjoyed today, please share. It really means a lot to me. And if you've really enjoyed today's episode, why not support me on my Patreon page? You can go on there and support me for as little as £1 per month. For that, you're guaranteed 8 episodes every month. That's 2 a week minimum. But not only that, thanks to my amazing friends at Richer Sounds, we have some fantastic prizes each and every month to give away to my Patreons. This alone is worth it, but on top of that, you're going to get some exclusive interviews that are just for Patreons, you get a badge for signing up, some stickers, and so much more. And please, it really does allow the podcast to go out there and go further. It means I can travel, do more podcasts, more interviews, which means more episodes for you guys at home. I want to say again a massive thanks for Connie for coming on the show. I want to say a thanks to all of you guys that have taken the time to listen at home. It means so much to me, and I'll be back in a couple of days' time with a brand new episode. So until then, listen to SeeYouSpaceCowboy, take care of yourself, and I'll see you soon.
I'm on a road shaped like a figure 8. I'm going nowhere, but I'm guaranteed to be late. You go on. baby. How have you? How have you? I drove around for hours, I drove around for days, I drove around for months and years and never went no place. In the past, now in the past, I stopped for gas, the working place. We pay for gas to drive around the interstate. You go alone.